In that moment, as I saw myself flatline, I started traveling upwards. The best way I can describe it, and I get goosebumps every time I talk about it, it just felt like everything started to free up in my body. It felt like ice, like this really cool, beautiful feeling of my body just starting to release and kind of pour out of my chest, almost like shooting a tunnel out of my chest of light. That morning felt like any other until it wasn't. I was late for work again. At that point in my life, I had started letting go of everything I once cared about. After my knee injuries and failed surgery, the Air Force, the career I had dreamed of since I was a kid, was slowly slipping away from me, and I didn't care anymore. I had lost my purpose, my direction, my reason to show up. So when my supervisor unlocked my dorm room door, fully expecting to find me sleeping in, she found something far worse, me, unconscious on the floor. They rushed me to the hospital on base. I remember nothing of the transport, but I remember waking up to machines beeping around me and the faces of doctors and nurses leaning over my bed, their eyes full of confusion. I was young, healthy, in the best shape of my life. There was no medical reason for me to be unconscious. They ran tests, drew blood, scanned and scanned again, but everything came back clear. No drugs, no drinking, no trauma, nothing made sense. I was simply gone. A nurse told me they'd run a few more tests, including a chest x-ray, and if nothing showed up, they'd send me back to my dorm. She adjusted the IV in my arm and walked out of the room. And then everything changed. The alarms began to scream. My vision shifted sharply from left to right, like a scene from a film spiraling into distortion. The lights blurred, reality warped. I felt disoriented, removed from my own body as if I were both present and absent at once. I could hear nurses yelling, footsteps pounded. I was at the far end of the hallway, and they were sprinting toward me, crashing into walls in their panic. Something was terribly wrong. As they crowded around me, I felt someone sit beside me just to my left. I couldn't see who it was, but I felt a hand stroke my arm gently. It was strange, comforting, yes, but strange. A calm, clear voice spoke. Air is going to travel up your arm. It's going to be really painful, but everything's going to be okay. And then the pain began. A violent, searing surge shot through the vein in my arm like a steel bullet too large to fit. I could feel every inch of it as it rose through me, a silver-hot current tearing upward, crashing toward my chest. My body convulsed. My right leg kicked into the air involuntarily, but through it all, the hand on my arm remained steady, and the voice beside me never changed, calm, gentle, unwavering. In the middle of chaos, there was peace. I desperately tried to look to my left to see who was speaking to me, who was with me in that storm of light and sound. And when I finally turned my head, there was no one there. The chair was empty. But in front of me, on the monitor, the line had gone flat. I had flatlined. The moment I saw the flat line, I knew I wasn't in my body anymore. But I wasn't afraid. What came next wasn't darkness or silence. It was light. Brilliant, soft, radiant light that didn't blind me, but somehow passed through me, around me, into me. My chest felt like it opened, like my very being had been set free from within, and from that space came a movement upward, gentle yet powerful. It was as if my soul was being drawn, not pulled, by something far greater than gravity. I wasn't floating, I wasn't flying. I was being carried by something I trusted completely, even though I had no words to describe it. The pain was gone, the confusion vanished. My body, or whatever remained of it, felt as light as breath. I didn't look back. There was no need. Wherever I was going, I knew it was where I was meant to be. That sense of certainty, of overwhelming peace, is impossible to describe to someone who hasn't tasted it. It wasn't just calm, it was home. And then I arrived. It wasn't a throne room. It wasn't a sky filled with harps and clouds. It was a garden, but not like any garden on earth. The flowers shimmered with colors I couldn't name. The leaves vibrated with light, almost humming with life. Every blade of grass, every petal, every tree seemed to breathe with purpose. There was no wind, but I could feel motion. There was no sun, but everything glowed. It was beauty in its purest form, alive, luminous, and awake. I took a step forward and felt the soil beneath my bare feet, soft and warm and real. I've never liked walking barefoot, but here it felt right. Even the grains of earth seemed to welcome me, as if the entire place had been waiting for me to return. And then I saw them, a man in a robe, strong, joyful, radiant, and a small boy with curly blonde hair, laughing, darting through the grass. The man Chase the boy with the kind of laughter you don't hear often on earth, deep, unburdened, eternal. I watched them for a while, smiling, drawn in by their joy. Something about it felt familiar, too familiar. When I looked closer, I gasped. The little boy was me. The hair, the grin, the freedom, I remembered it. I remembered being that happy. I remembered chasing butterflies, climbing trees, laughing until my stomach hurt. And I remembered how all of that had slowly faded as I grew up, as I learned what it meant to be responsible, to be strong, to be serious. That little boy had vanished somewhere between boot camp and broken knees. And then the man turned around. I didn't need an introduction. I didn't need a name. I just knew it was Jesus. He didn't look like the paintings I'd grown up seeing. No long golden hair or robes floating in the wind. He looked like a man healthy, strong, real, with short brown hair, green eyes that seemed to know everything, and a smile that could break any fear. But the moment I saw his face, my soul responded. It was like recognizing a friend I had always known but forgotten along the way. We didn't speak out loud, but he told me everything. He showed me that life wasn't supposed to be a checklist of accomplishments or a constant struggle to prove my worth. Life was meant to be light, to be laughter, to be love. He reminded me of what I had known as a child but lost in the seriousness of adulthood. He didn't shame me. He didn't scold me for losing focus. He simply reminded me of the joy I was created for. And then he said it, you have to go back. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just nodded because deep inside I understood I still had something to do. There was more life to live, more light to share, more people to touch. Saying goodbye to him wasn't sorrowful. It felt like parting with a close friend at the end of a long conversation, knowing you'd see each other again soon. And just like that, I was gone. When I opened my eyes, the world felt unfamiliar. It wasn't just the ceiling above me or the light in the room. It was the stillness in my chest, the absence of pain, and the unmistakable sense that I had crossed a threshold that no one comes back from. For a brief moment, I thought I was still dreaming, still in that garden, still walking barefoot through a place too beautiful to explain. But as my vision cleared and I looked around, the reality settled in. I was back in my body, and I wasn't where I had been before. I was no longer on base. The hospital room was different. The people walking by weren't in uniform. Everything was sterile and strange, like I had been dropped into another chapter without being told how the last one ended. I later learned they had transferred me off base, moved me to a hospital in Hampton, Virginia to pronounce me dead. That's where I had been taken after the flatline. That's where I was supposed to stay. But here I was, blinking, breathing, fully awake. A nurse walked past the door and did a double take when she saw me. I said hello, softly, not even sure if my voice would work. She froze for a moment, eyes wide, then turned and rushed down the hall. Moments later, a doctor came in, his face pale, his expression somewhere between disbelief and unease. He didn't know what to say. There was no protocol for this, no clear explanation. He just told me I'd be sent back to the Air Force and they could decide what to do with me. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just asked for a phone. And when my friend answered, I said the first thing that came to mind, simple, absurd, completely true. Hey, I just died. Can you come pick me up from the hospital? He said yes, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And so we did what any two young guys would probably do after one of them came back from death. We went to Chick-fil-A. I was starving. It turns out dying works up an appetite. We sat there eating chicken sandwiches, laughing at how bizarre everything was, both of us unsure how to even begin processing it all. But I wasn't ready to go back. I couldn't return to that same dorm room, that same space where I had collapsed. I needed to breathe. I needed to walk. I needed to feel the world around me to believe I was really in it. So we drove to Washington, D.C., spent a couple of days walking among the monuments, taking pictures, letting the reality of my return slowly sink in. But even as I tried to distract myself, one thing wouldn't go away, the bruising on my left arm. It was dark, deep, and painful to look at, running all the way up from the IV site where the air had entered. I went back to the hospital again just to get answers, not just about the bruises, but about all of it. Why did I flatline? What exactly happened? Was it a mistake, a fluke, a miracle? The report was brief, one paragraph. Patient suffered an air embolism. That's all it said. Somehow, air had entered my bloodstream, traveled up toward my heart, and stopped it. Just like the voice had warned me, just like I had felt. But no one could explain why I came back. They had no words for what I had seen or who had been sitting beside me or why I still carried the memory of that garden like it had been my home for 1,000 years. And so I did the only thing I knew how to do. I stayed quiet. I didn't tell the story to strangers. I didn't share it with colleagues or doctors. I didn't even know what NDE meant. Near-death experience wasn't a term I'd ever heard. I just knew that something had changed, that I had touched something eternal, and I wasn't supposed to forget. Something shifted in me after I came back. It wasn't loud or dramatic at first, just a quiet, undeniable awareness that I was still here, and that meant something. I didn't know what it was yet, but I couldn't waste it. I had been given a second chance, and even if I didn't understand the reason, I wasn't about to live like I hadn't seen what I saw. So I made myself a silent promise. I would stop surviving and start living. And that's exactly what I did. Everything I had ever thought about doing, anything that had once sparked curiosity in me, but I'd brushed aside for being impractical or unserious. I chased it. I joined a breakdancing club at a university I didn't even attend. I learned ballroom dancing and taught it. I tried stand-up comedy and stood on small stages just to hear people laugh. I photographed weddings, met celebrities, hosted contests, worked as a sports announcer for local baseball and hockey games. I checked off every box of joy I could find, not because I was running away from death, but because I had looked it in the face and turned back, and now every moment mattered. For a while, I lived like that, free, curious, alive. But eventually life tugged me back towards something quieter, more structured. I took a job at a corporate radio station. It paid well. I had a house, stability. People said I was doing well, that I had figured things out. But deep inside, something started to feel hollow again. I wasn't miserable, but I wasn't glowing anymore. The light I had seen, the laughter I had been asked to share, the joy that had pulsed through every flower in that garden it had dimmed. I was trading my gift for a paycheck, and I knew it. It wasn't until I joined a retreat for veterans that everything came rushing back. 5 days of silence, meditation, yoga, things I'd never tried, things I used to roll my eyes at. But something in me said go. So I went, I listened, I breathed, I slowed down. And by the end of the retreat, I felt lighter than I had since the day I left heaven. Not just mentally, but physically. My body, my mind, my soul, all aligned. And when I got home, my wife took one look at me and said, "You're different." She was right. I had remembered who I was, what I had been shown, why I had come back. The next few days felt like walking through a world that had always been there, but now appeared in high definition. I could feel everything, people's emotions, energy, pain. I would walk into a room and sense who was struggling, who was hurting, who was pretending they weren't. It wasn't just observation, it was absorption. Their pain became mine. Their heaviness settled in my chest. At first, I thought it was empathy, but it was more than that. One day, while praying for my grandmother who was in the hospital, I held out my hands, just asking God to ease her suffering. As I prayed, I felt a tingling in my palms like static moving under the skin, building and rising. When I looked down, I saw visible marks forming in both hands, deep, red, undeniable. I showed my wife. We took a picture. Others I trusted looked at it and said, "You need to be careful. You can't take on everyone's pain. It's not yours to carry." They were right. But in that moment, I understood something that changed me. Healing is real, not as a metaphor, but as a gift, a transmission, a burden, and a calling. And I was part of it. It wasn't long after the marks appeared on my hands that I found myself on a plane, flying through clear skies, trying to rest, but too alert to sleep. The cabin was quiet, the kind of heavy silence that settles when strangers are too tired to talk and too bored to care. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the engines blend into my breath. That's when it happened again. Not a vision, not a dream, a presence. It pressed gently into my chest, not with weight, but with recognition. I didn't have to open my eyes to know it was him. Jesus didn't speak with thunder. He never did. But I felt his words the way you feel warmth through a window. You're on the right path, but you need to take care of yourself. His voice was firm but loving, like a friend who knows your soul better than you do. If you drain your battery trying to fix everyone, he said, you won't have enough left to do what I've asked you to do. And then came the hardest truth of all. You have to let people have their own human experience. I sat there, still as stone, absorbing what I had refused to see. In my desire to help, I had crossed a line. I had started believing it was my job to carry other people's pain, to heal everyone I encountered, to rescue the broken before they even asked for help. But not every wound needs to be stopped. Not every sorrow is a curse. Sometimes people need to walk through pain to understand grace. And if I intervened every time, I would rob them of that transformation. It wasn't rejection, it was release. I began to understand that I'm not the source, I'm the vessel. My hands are not the healer, they are only open when asked to be. And if I try to pour from emptiness, I dishonor the gift. That encounter in the sky wasn't dramatic, it didn't end with fanfare. But it marked me as clearly as the first one did, and this time I came back with peace and boundaries. Now, when I feel the pull, I pause. I pray. I ask not just can I help, but am I meant to? I've learned to wait for the whisper, not act on assumption. The light I was shown is not mine to control. It passes through me when the time is right. And when it does, it heals not just the person receiving, but me too. Since then, I've watched the world differently. I see the disconnect, the quiet sadness in people's eyes. I see children at bus stops staring into screens instead of each other. And I think of my own childhood, the laughter, the closeness, the human presence that felt like oxygen. I think of that little boy in the garden, the one with blonde curls and a boundless heart. And I remind myself daily that he's still inside me. He didn't die, he was waiting. And now he's awake. People often ask me, what's the meaning of life? I don't have a polished answer, but I know this. We're here to learn, to love, to carry light without hoarding it. Education doesn't only come from books, it comes from listening, from stillness, from remembering what joy feels like and choosing it every day. My grandmother used to say that education would heal the world. I think she was right, but I'd add one more thing: so will laughter, so will love. I died once and it changed everything, but I live now and that changes more.